My name is Priya, Chetty-Rajagopal, and I want to talk to you about a crisp, bright Bangalore morning, Sunday, October 16th, 2016, 2 years ago, when from all parts of Bangalore, artists, professionals, executives, old people, young people, children, 8,500 people came together at this place for just one purpose: to stand up for their city and to say, no, you are not going to destroy our city. Still fly over Beda. This was one of the moments that changed Bangalore almost completely. If you look at all the different different movements that came out of it, whether you look at the Bellandur Lake or the trees or heritage or traffic issues, infrastructure, ward committees, so much of it got the impetus from the magic that the human chain was on 16th October 2016. In some ways, Bangalore will never be the same again. And the movement forward for Bangalore as a woke city, as one of probably the most civically evolved cities, a city where citizen involvement is considered to be paramount. Have things not happened before? Of course they have. There have been many, many different focus areas, but this particular time, the magic of Bangalore waking up as one, waking up to go to war for their city, waking up to make sure that the city that was crying for their help, a city that was eroding in front of their very eyes, would have the sponsor and the carer that it should. And that was all of us. The beauty was, whether it was 8,500 people, or 1, or 100, or 20,000, every single one of them were leaders. Every single one of them. And that really is the beauty of the whole steel flyover. And the beauty of a campaign that rises above itself, above people, above a cause, to allow people to come together and do what they really want to do to make a change. Now, from the comfort of 2 years later, I'm looking at how did this all happen and what was the magic of this? And for me, when I think about it, I realize none of us who came in that day were designated to be people who were leading the movement or to do something or had a very clear structure. This was a movement that was very, very paradoxically leaderless, but still led. It was leadership beyond authority. We had neither salary certificate, an appointment letter, a job description, or even a clear mandate as to what we were supposed to do. But we had a few things in place. And those were the fact that we couldn't shrug anymore. The fact that we knew something and we couldn't unknow it. The fact that we had purity of purpose. That we were thinking with our minds, but following through with our hearts. And somewhere deep inside, we wanted to be the change that we see. All of that is because I'm sitting here 2 years later and I can sit and pontificate about this. But I want to talk about one thing in particular. And leadership beyond authority is something we really need to think about, because the years as it goes on, the future as it evolves, is not going to be a space where somebody tells you, these are the tick boxes you need to check. Think about this. Leadership beyond. But I want to move a little bit onto what some of my takeaways are as to how does it happen. It has to happen again. We're going to be able to have many things that will move us or shake us or outrage us. We were outraged as citizens. What were we outraged about? There was this huge steel monster that was coming up that was going to destroy the heart of our city. It was flawed on product. The product just didn't make sense at all. The process was not followed at all, the democratic process. And the the impact on people was just not considered. So we knew all that. And we knew that by sitting back, like we had for so many years, we're going to let a Bangalore completely erode. And 10 years from now, what would we tell our children, our grandchildren, the next generation of saying, so what did you do when Bangalore was burning? Well, one of the things I said the night before the human chain on October 15th was, when history is made on October 16th, where will you say you were? So stand up, show up for the human chain. And I was so grateful that 8,500 people did on that Sunday morning. And Bangalore was never the same again. So if I sound a little, pontificating, or it's just that I'm looking at it from a distance and I'm able to see process. We were just bumbling from one part of the campaign to the other. We were working with instinct. We weren't looking at anything else except for doing everything we could to stop the steel flyover. But one of the things that struck me the most about this entire movement was this. And this is the shrug. If we want to move forward in our lives, if we want to make any changes, if we want to make an impact, the first thing that needs to be done is to address the shrug. Have you shrugged? Have I? All the time. All the time. And you know what the shrug stops? The shrug stops energy, impetus, goals, because there's just no collective ownership. It's like saying, oh, she will do it. No, somebody will manage it. Or it's too much for me. So where the collective shrug can actually, an entire country, a movement, a space, you and me, our lives, our careers, it can. Think about it. Address the shrug. The shrug comes from so many different parts of us. It comes from ignorance. It comes from indifference. I don't care. It comes from information underload or overload. Are we completely clogged in with so much information on electronic media, we don't know what to take as real anymore? It comes from inequity. We see so much of inequity, but we still don't know what to do about it. It comes from insurmountability. So there are many E's that you're hearing here. Ignorance, indifference, insurmountability, enormity. And sometimes, and I hope, it comes from evil. But one thing is it leads to evil. And that's something that we should look at. So, as I said, if I sound like I'm pontificating or I'm sounding very pompous, guess what? I'm a reformed shrugger. I still do, but at least I know when I'm shrugging. I know that I'm not doing something that I should. The second thing which struck me was, once you know, you cannot unknow. You cannot unknow. Psychiatrists make a lot of money from exactly this, because many of us carry things with us in our minds and in our souls that we really would give a fortune to unknow. But every day we're bombarded with information. So look at the steel flyover as an example. You knew, and I knew, that sitting back would result in a city that was slowly, steadily imploding. For me, at that time, Bangalore became a person. Bangalore became a person I needed to fight for, a person that was reaching out to me while indignities were being done to that person, being run over, being so victimized. And I felt that we have to do something about it because I could see how much of it was wrong. I knew. Sadly, I could not unknow. And like many people in Bangalore at the exact same time, in the exact same place, for example, looking at this ghastly building that was to come up and destroy the heart of the city, we felt exactly the same way. And that was a movement that changed all of us forever. The next thing that was my takeaway when I look back at this was purity of purpose. Now, when I say purity of purpose, you look at me and say, oh my God, this is one of those priggish, oversweet little things, which is, Mother Teresa kind of statement. It's not. It's, and I know that when things are done with a clear focus on the goal, everybody is committed to the goal and they will work backwards. It is just as simple as that. But at the same time, when anything we do collectively is marred by greed, by envy, by the fact that I want to show up my neighbor, or I want to just get my 2 minutes of fame, it shows through in the result. And the purity of purpose is something that I have seen personally. And I know also when it is not there, campaigns and objectives fail. So purity of purpose. People said, oh, you must be politically motivated. Really? This? Politically motivated? You've got to be kidding. I'm a corporate person, worked 30 years in a career, don't know how to spell politics. Next was something which was also very, very important. Thinking with your mind, but following through with your heart. And that was something that was really important to all of us. Tell me, we have some of the best minds in the city. We have some of the Silicon Valley of India. It's the brain power of the world. Tell me if Bangalore has any shortage in terms of intellectual capacity. Of course not. But feet on street, we have some way to go. The fact that there were so many great minds working on this, and the fact that we could work with those was an important aspect for all of us. But following through with your heart was probably the biggest success that we had. Look at the programs we did. We did a satyagraha. In fact, today is the second year anniversary of the satyagraha we did. I never thought I'd ever be in a satyagraha in my life. A referendum. We made a petition to the governor. We actually had a panel discussion. We had a human chain. And we did so many different impulsive, spontaneous campaigns that really impacted the cause. I'll give you a small example. I remember on 8th of October, sitting around a table in Church Street with a bunch of us, all outraged, all hugely, we can't let this happen, that kind of mood. And so I was thinking, we must do this panel discussion and we must have bureaucrats and experts, and then we will take this opinion to the government, and then magic, they will say, very well done. Thank you so much for telling us we're going to scrap it. That was how naive I was at that time. And I remember across the table, there was Prakash Belavadi, the theater person, and he's an engineer, and just this most intuitive person. And he said, you know what, no, I think we need to do a human chain. And in my mind I said, human chain? Oh my, it's messy. 10 people will turn up. I had 100 objections. But at that point, in that 2 seconds that we looked across at each other in the room, and many others did, we knew that was exactly what we were going to do. And that was a defining moment. So leading with your mind, thinking with your mind, but following through with your heart is a very important part of leadership without authority. The last thing, which is being the change that you want to see. You have to visualize. The satyagraha that we did, for example, was something that was so extraordinary because it was so reflective. But strangely enough, just on that day, Delhi was going through one of their worst smogs ever. People were falling sick like flies. They were talking about canceling the marathon, to stay indoors in schools. Not to go to school. And suddenly we were able to visualize through this brown smog that was in all the papers of what our future as a city, what our future of Bangalore was. And suddenly we were able to see that why we were doing something like this. This is the change we wanted to see. We wanted to make sure this doesn't happen to us. So the visualization was a very important part of where we eventually took this. And we engage with democracy in the most real way. For me, democracy, like perhaps I don't want to speak on behalf of many others, but for me, democracy is this. I go and I vote, and I'm so proud of myself. I take that indelible ink and I flash it around for a few days, saying, I voted. So that's the most democratic action I've ever taken. I even won a gold medal for it. But for the first time, we understood what democracy was about. It was about engaging with the government and standing up for what you believe in, for the city, because if you didn't, you knew what could happen. When the Bangalore that came out on that day didn't shrug. They stood up, they stepped up, and they showed up. And we kept doing that. We kept doing that. But look at the mechanics through which leadership works. Leadership is a flat, non-hierarchical, very agile structure. We were a bunch of motley people, different parts of town, different genders, different professions. We didn't even know each other, but we came together at that time. It was about creating capacity. It was about empowering. There were words that you heard a lot, like, yes, we can, or even more importantly, we did it. And you know why? Because if you look at a campaign that started in October and went on finally till March, there was no way we could have sustained it with the things and what we did. But there were several small milestones along the way, and we allowed ourselves to feel and celebrate the small successes that happened. This is a very important part of any kind of leadership that is a framework around which we should wrap ourselves. Empowering, creating capacity, being flexible, being responsible for working backwards with a purpose. It didn't matter who was doing what, because at that point, you had the same purpose. Everybody had the same purpose, right? I will leave you with a few thoughts about this wonderful moment going forward. We've talked about addressing the shrug. We've talked about once you know, you cannot unknow, the purity of purpose, thinking with your mind, leading with your heart, and we've talked about being the change you want to see. But I'm going to ask you a question. There are going to be points in your life when something will happen, and there will be a change or a decision or a path you have to take. And what will you do then? If not now, then when? If not me, then who? At some point in this very close future, you're going to know. And at some point, I'm going to ask you, will you shrug? I hope not. Thank you.